Have you ever wondered where it all began? Not just history, but civilization itself. Who were the first people to look up at the stars and see patterns, to build cities out of mud and dreams, to write down their thoughts for the very first time? Today, we're journeying back over 6,000 years to the sun-baked plains of Mesopotamia to uncover the story of a people who laid the foundations for our modern world, the Sumerians. Forget what you think you know from internet theories. We're not talking about ancient aliens or lost continents. We're diving deep into the hard evidence, the archaeology, the genetics, the linguistic analysis to understand who the Sumerians really were, according to science. What did they look like? Where did they come from? And how did this enigmatic group, seemingly appearing out of nowhere, spark a revolution that changed humanity forever? Stick around, because the true story is more fascinating than any fiction. Our story starts in a land nestled between two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. This region, part of the Fertile Crescent in modern-day Iraq, was once called Sumer. Around 4500 BC, something incredible started to happen here. People began to gather, not just in small villages, but in large, organized communities. These weren't just settlements. They were the world's first true cities. We're talking about legendary places like Uruk, Ur, and Eridu. Archaeologists, digging through the layers of time in this region, have unearthed the building blocks of urban life. They found massive temple complexes called ziggurats, towering structures of mud brick that dominated the flat landscape. These weren't just places of worship. They were the economic and administrative hearts of the city. Imagine a skyscraper and a city hall rolled into one, but built thousands of years before the invention of steel. They also uncovered evidence of complex irrigation systems. The Sumerians were master engineers. They dug canals and built dikes to control the unpredictable floods of the rivers, transforming the arid land into a breadbasket that could support tens of thousands of people. This agricultural surplus was the key. It freed up a portion of the population to specialize in other things: priests, artisans, soldiers, and scribes. This division of labor is a hallmark of any complex society, and the Sumerians were the pioneers. So we have cities and agriculture. But where did these people actually come from? This is one of the biggest mysteries. The Sumerian language is a linguistic isolate, meaning it's completely unrelated to any other known language, ancient or modern. It's not Semitic like Akkadian or Hebrew, nor is it Indo-European like English or Sanskrit. This linguistic uniqueness suggests they weren't closely related to their neighbors. For a long time, scholars debated whether the Sumerians were indigenous to Mesopotamia or if they migrated from somewhere else. The migrationist theory suggested they came from a mountainous region, pointing to the fact that their temples were built on raised platforms, like artificial mountains. Perhaps from the Zagros Mountains to the east, or even from a land now submerged by the Persian Gulf. However, recent archaeological and genetic evidence is shifting the consensus. Studies of ancient skeletal remains from Sumerian sites, when compared with other ancient and modern populations in the Near East, don't show a sudden massive influx of a new genetic group. Instead, it seems the Sumerian culture emerged from a gradual mixing and development of local, prehistoric peoples who had inhabited southern Mesopotamia for millennia, groups like the Ubaid culture that preceded them. So, it's less a story of a foreign invasion and more a story of a cultural explosion. A unique identity and language developed right there in the riverlands of southern Iraq from a deep ancestral pool. They weren't outsiders. They were the brilliant culmination of thousands of years of local human development. Now let's talk about their most famous invention, an innovation so profound that it divides history into before and after. I'm talking about writing. Around 3500 BC, in cities like Uruk, the Sumerians needed a way to keep track of their complex economy. Who paid their taxes? How many sheep did the temple own? How much grain was in the warehouse? To solve this, they began using pictographs, simple pictures of the objects they were counting. A picture of a head of barley meant barley. A drawing of an ox meant an ox. But this was cumbersome. The real breakthrough came when they started using symbols to represent sounds, a system we call cuneiform. Using a reed stylus, they would press wedge-shaped marks into wet clay tablets. This is what cuneiform means, wedge-shaped. Suddenly, they could write down not just 3 sheep, but abstract ideas. They could record laws, write letters, tell stories, and compose poetry. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the world's oldest works of literature, was born from this system. This wasn't just accounting anymore. It was the birth of human literature and recorded history. The ability to transmit knowledge across generations with perfect fidelity had been invented. The Sumerians didn't just invent writing. Their contributions are mind-boggling. They were brilliant astronomers and mathematicians. They used a sexagesimal or base 60 counting system. Does that sound strange? You use it every day. It's why we have 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, and 360 degrees in a circle. That's a direct legacy of the Sumerians. They meticulously charted the movements of the stars and planets, creating the first astronomical catalogs. This wasn't just for curiosity's sake. It helped them create a precise calendar of 12 lunar months, essential for timing their agricultural festivals and planting seasons. They identified constellations and developed the basics of astrology, which, for them, was a serious science for predicting the future and the will of the gods. Their ingenuity didn't stop there. Archaeologists have found evidence that the Sumerians invented the potter's wheel, allowing for the mass production of ceramics. And, perhaps most transformatively, they are widely credited with one of the most important inventions of all time, the wheel. Not for transportation at first, the earliest wheels were likely used for pottery, but by 3200 BC, they were putting wheels on carts. This revolutionized trade and warfare, allowing for the movement of heavy goods and the creation of war chariots. They also pioneered legal systems. The Code of Ur-Nammu, predating the more famous Code of Hammurabi by about 300 years, is the oldest surviving law code in the world. It wasn't an eye for an eye. It was a sophisticated system that prescribed fines and compensation for various offenses, showing a desire for justice and social order. So, if the Sumerians were so advanced, what happened to them? Why don't we speak Sumerian today? The answer lies in the dynamic and often brutal politics of ancient Mesopotamia. Sumer was never a single unified empire. It was a collection of competing city-states, each with its own king and patron god, who were constantly vying for power, water rights, and fertile land. Around 2334 BC, a new power rose to their north, the Akkadians, a Semitic-speaking people led by the legendary Sargon the Great. Sargon conquered the Sumerian city-states one by one, creating what is often called the world's first empire. Although the Sumerian cities were now under Akkadian rule, their culture was so respected and advanced that the Akkadians adopted it almost entirely. They used cuneiform to write their own language, worshipped Sumerian gods alongside their own, and continued their scientific traditions. The Sumerians experienced a brief brilliant revival around 2100 BC. Known as the Third Dynasty of Ur, this was a golden age of Sumerian art and literature. But it was short-lived. Continued pressure from neighboring groups, combined with environmental issues like increasing soil salinity from millennia of irrigation, weakened their heartland. By 2000 BC, new groups like the Amorites had risen to prominence, and the Sumerian language slowly died out as a spoken tongue, replaced by Akkadian. It became a dead language like Latin in the Middle Ages, preserved only by scribes and scholars who studied the ancient texts. The Sumerian people weren't wiped out. They were absorbed. Their genetic and cultural DNA blended into the subsequent civilizations of Mesopotamia, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, and through them, their innovations were passed down to the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, and ultimately to us. So, the next time you check the time on your watch, or look up a law, or write a sentence, or even just spin a wheel, take a moment to remember the Sumerians. They were not aliens or mythical beings. They were real people, brilliant innovators and engineers who, standing on the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates, lit the first sparks of civilization. They solved fundamental problems of human coexistence and in doing so, drafted the blueprint for the world we live in today. The science is clear. Our modern world is built on a foundation of Sumerian mud brick. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into history based on real evidence. Let me know in the comments what ancient civilization you'd like us to explore next. See you in the next video.